The crosshair settled on Chief Derek Kane's temple. Through the magnified optic of the Mk-22 advanced sniper rifle, Captain Reese Hartwell could see individual beads of sweat rolling down the side of his face. Despite the minus 18 degrees Celsius cold that turned the Sierra Nevada mountains into a frozen hell, she could see the tension in his jaw as he prepared to kick down the door. She could see the exact spot where the .338 Lapua Magnum round would enter his skull if her hand twitched even a fraction of an inch to the left. Her finger rested on the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure, then 3. The rifle wanted to fire. Her training wanted her to fire. Center mass, controlled pairs, eliminate the threat. Except Chief Derek Kane wasn't the threat. He was walking into one. Reese forced her breathing to slow, forced the crosshair to drift 6 inches to the right, forced herself to aim at the stone doorframe instead of the man she was supposed to be protecting. The man who had spent the last 6 months trying to drive her out of the teams. The man who had told her to her face that she was a political stunt, a diversity hire, a liability that would get real operators killed. Now she was about to save his life by nearly taking it. But that trigger pull was the end of something. To understand why Petty Officer First Class Reese Hartwell was lying on a frozen mountain in California, about to commit what would technically be friendly fire, you had to go back 48 hours. Back to when this was still supposed to be a simple mission. The briefing room at Naval Base San Diego smelled like burnt coffee and the particular anxiety that comes from men preparing to walk into harm's way. Reese sat in the back row, her operational folder open but unread. She had learned during her first month with SEAL Team 7 that sitting in the back meant fewer eyes on her, fewer opportunities for the casual comments that felt like paper cuts, death by 1,000 dismissals. Admiral Rebecca Stone stood at the front of the room. Her silver hair was immaculate, even in a pre-mission briefing. Behind her, satellite imagery of a valley system in the Sierra Nevada region glowed on the projector screen. Reese recognized the terrain: limestone ridges, cave complexes, the kind of place where you could hide an army or lose one. "Gentlemen," Admiral Stone began, then caught herself with the practiced ease of someone who had been through media training. "And Captain Hartwell, what I'm about to tell you is classified top secret, code word clearance only." She clicked to the next slide. 2 cylindrical objects, each about the size of a large backpack. W-54 tactical nuclear devices. Suitcase nukes, small enough to fit in a trunk, large enough to level 6 city blocks each. 48 hours ago, 2 of these devices were stolen from a secure storage facility in Nevada. Not by foreign actors, by American citizens. The room went silent. Nuclear weapons had a way of doing that. Admiral Stone's expression was carved from granite. "Intelligence indicates these devices are being moved through the Sierra Nevada mountains by a domestic militia group. Leadership unknown, but tactical analysis suggests former military. Tier 1 background. They're heading toward an abandoned mining compound here." She pointed to a topographical map. Elevation markers showed a valley surrounded by peaks over 12,000 feet. "Our window is narrow. Weather's coming in. Snowstorm hits in 72 hours, and this whole region becomes impassable until spring. If those nukes leave that compound, if they reach a major city, we're looking at a catastrophic scenario that makes 9/11 look like a prelude." Another click. Range cards, defensive positions, approach routes. "The operation is designated Crimson Sanctuary. Bravo team will conduct a direct action raid to secure the devices. Time on target is 0300 local. Insertion via MH47 at this landing zone, 8 kilometers out. Overwatch will be established here." She pointed to a ridge that looked like God had taken a chisel to the mountains. "Overwatch team will consist of 2 personnel, a spotter and a sniper. Their job is to provide cover for Bravo's approach and neutralize any threats that emerge during the breach." Reese felt the weight of attention shift. She didn't look up from her folder. "Master Chief Morrison will serve as spotter and tactical advisor. Captain Hartwell will be primary sniper. The silence in the room changed texture. It went from focused attention to something else, something that felt like doubt made audible through the absence of sound. Chief Derek Kane raised his hand. He didn't wait to be called on. Ma'am, with respect, is it wise to put an untested operator in a critical Overwatch position? Hartwell's only been with the team for 6 months. She hasn't been blooded. Admiral Stone's expression didn't change, but Reese saw her jaw tighten. Captain Hartwell graduated first in her sniper class. She holds the current base record for cold-bore accuracy at 1,500 meters. She is the most qualified shooter available for this operation. On a range, Kane pressed. With all due respect to Hartwell's qualification scores, a range is not the same as combat. When rounds start coming back at you, when the pressure is on, we need someone we can count on, not someone who might freeze. Reese kept her eyes on the satellite imagery. She had learned not to engage. Engagement meant emotion. Emotion meant proving them right. That women were too emotional for this work. A voice cut through the tension, gravel over broken glass. Kane, when's the last time you shot a 1,500-meter cold-bore group you could cover with a quarter? Master Chief Garrett Morrison stood near the door, arms crossed over a chest that looked like it had been carved from the same granite as the mountains they'd be operating in. 58 years old, 4 deployments to Panama, 3 to the first Gulf War, 2 more to Somalia. The lines on his face were a roadmap of every hard decision he'd ever had to make. And there were a lot of lines. Kane hesitated. I'm just saying, I know what you're saying. You're saying you're worried about the new operator. That's reasonable. I was worried too, until I saw her shoot. Morrison's eyes found Reese, and there was something in them that might have been respect, or might have been the baseline professionalism of a man who didn't have time for politics. She's better than you, Kane. She's better than me. And unless you want to hump an M110 up that ridge and pull your own Overwatch, I suggest you shut up and let the Admiral finish her brief. The room went quiet again, but it was a different quiet, the kind where people reassess. Admiral Stone cleared her throat. Master Chief Morrison brings up an excellent point. This operation was designed around the specific skill sets of the personnel assigned. Captain Hartwell's long-range precision capabilities are exactly what we need for this terrain. Bravo team will be exposed during their approach. Overwatch is their insurance policy. She clicked to the next slide. Rules of engagement. ROE is restrictive. This is sovereign U.S. territory. We are operating under federal law enforcement authority, but we cannot be seen as the aggressors. Do not fire unless fired upon. Do not engage unless you have positive identification of hostile intent. This is a scalpel, not a hammer. We get in, we secure the packages, we get out. The world never knows we were there. Reese finally looked up from her folder. The satellite imagery showed more than the Admiral was saying. The compound wasn't just an abandoned mine. The defensive positions were too good. The sight lines too carefully managed. Someone with training had turned that valley into a killing ground. She raised her hand. Admiral Stone nodded. Hartwell. Ma'am, the thermal imaging from the last pass. Can we pull that up? A moment of hesitation. Then the Admiral clicked back 3 slides. The compound appeared in shades of gray and white. Heat signatures blooming like flowers against the cold stone. Reese stood, moving to the front of the room. She was aware of every eye on her, aware that this was a test within a test. She pointed to a cluster of heat signatures on the western ridge. These signatures here, they're uniform, spaced exactly 40 meters apart. That's not random sentry placement. That's professional interval for interlocking fields of fire. She traced her finger along the valley floor. And this pattern here, the way the snow's been disturbed, it's too regular. That's not foot traffic. That's deliberate concealment. I'd bet money there are pressure plates under that snow. IEDs daisy-chained along the approach route. Kane leaned forward. Or it's just wind patterns, shadows, Reese ignored him. Her eyes were on the Admiral. Ma'am, if I'm right, Bravo team is walking into an ambush. This isn't a militia compound. It's a trap. Admiral Stone studied the imagery. Her face was unreadable. Intelligence assessment concluded this was a low-security target, local extremists with minimal tactical training. Then intelligence is wrong, ma'am. The words hung in the air like a challenge. You didn't tell an admiral that intelligence was wrong. Not as a captain, not in your first 6 months on a team, not if you wanted to have a career. Morrison stepped forward, studying the thermal image more closely. She's right. Look at the heat bloom from this structure here. That's a generator signature, too big for basic power needs. You run a generator that size, you're powering something serious. Communications equipment, maybe electronic warfare systems. Admiral Stone's expression didn't change, but Reese saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. The math of risk versus reward. The political cost of aborting an operation versus the tactical cost of walking into an ambush. Noted, she said finally. Overwatch will adjust their assessment based on what they observe on the ground. If the situation changes, we adapt. But the mission stands. We need those nukes. Questions? No one spoke. Good. Wheels up at 2100 hours. Get your gear squared away. Dismissed. The room emptied in the controlled chaos of men preparing for combat. Reese gathered her folder and headed for the door. Hartwell, she turned. Morrison was standing by the projector, still studying the thermal image. That was either really smart or really stupid, he said without looking at her. Which do you think it was, Master Chief? I think you just made yourself a target. Kane and half this team already think you're here because of politics. Now you're second-guessing intelligence in front of the Admiral. You're making enemies. I didn't come here to make friends. Morrison finally looked at her. His eyes were the color of winter ice. No, you came here to prove something. That's dangerous. Operators who are trying to prove something make mistakes. They take risks they shouldn't take. They get people killed. Reese felt something cold settle in her chest. Not anger, colder than that. With respect, Master Chief, I'm not here to prove anything to you or anyone else. I'm here because I'm the best long-range shooter in this unit. If Bravo team walks into an ambush, they're going to need someone who can shoot, and I can shoot. A ghost of something crossed Morrison's face. It might have been approval. Prove it, on the range. One shot, right now. You make it, I'll trust you with my life on that ridge. You miss, I'm recommending to the Admiral we swap you out for Baker. He's not as good, but he's been downrange. Reese met his eyes. What's the range? 1,200 meters. Wind is gusting to 20 knots. Cold bore. No sighters. It was an impossible shot. The kind of shot you didn't take in combat because the odds were too low and the cost of missing was too high. But this wasn't combat. This was a test. And Reese Hartwell had been taking tests her entire life. Let's go. The range at Naval Base San Diego was a strip of scrubland that stretched out toward distant brown hills. The wind came off the Pacific in irregular gusts that made the heat shimmer dance like water. 2,000 meters downrange, a steel target the size of a man's torso stood alone against the beige infinity. Morrison set up the spotting scope while Reese checked her rifle. The Mk-22 was new. She'd only put 200 rounds through it. The barrel was still factory tight, which meant it would shoot a hair different than a worn-in gun. She'd have to account for that. Wind's variable, Morrison said, eye to the spotting scope. I'm seeing gusts from 8 to 20 knots. Full value, left to right. Temperature is 38 Celsius. Elevation here is 150 feet, but you're shooting across a depression. Effective elevation is closer to sea level. Reese did the math in her head. 1,200 meters. In American terms, just over 1,300 yards. 3/4 of a mile. The bullet would be in the air for almost 2 seconds. In that time, gravity would pull it down. Wind would push it sideways. The rotation of the Earth itself would cause drift. She settled into position behind the rifle. Prone, bipod loaded, cheek weld firm, eye relief perfect. The reticle of the Schmidt and Bender scope was crisp against the hazy target. No pressure, Morrison said, but Kane is watching from the tower with binoculars, along with about 15 other guys. Word travels fast on a base. Reese didn't respond. She was building the shot in her mind. The wind was the biggest variable. She watched the mirage, the way it boiled and shifted. She watched the dust devils forming and dying in the middle distance. She felt the wind on the back of her neck and translated that feeling into numbers. 1,200 meters. Bullet drop would be approximately 41 feet. She dialed 28.5 milliradians of elevation into the turret. Click, click, click. Each click was 1/10 of a mil. Each mil was 3.6 inches at 100 meters. The math was automatic now, burned into her brain through 10,000 repetitions. Wind. Right now it was gusting to 18 knots, left to right, full value. She'd need to hold approximately 6 feet left of center, but the wind wasn't constant. She needed to time the shot for a lull or for a consistent gust. Inconsistency was death. She watched, waited. The wind was a living thing. It had rhythms, patterns. There, a sustained gust, 15 knots, holding steady for 3 seconds, 4, 5. Reese took a breath, let half of it out, found the natural respiratory pause where her body was most still. Her heart rate was 52 beats per minute, slow and steady. The reticle hovered 6 feet left of the target, empty space. She was aiming at nothing and trusting physics to bring the bullet home. The trigger broke clean. Surprise break, the way it was supposed to be. The recoil was a gentle push. The muzzle brake did its job, keeping the rifle flat. Through the scope, Reese saw the bullet trace. A faint distortion in the air, like looking through water. The trace arced up, then down. Then the steel target rang like a bell. The sound took another second to reach them. A clear, pure note that said, "Hit." Morrison didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he pulled back from the spotting scope. Center mass. Call it a 9-inch group at 1,200 meters in variable wind. He looked at her with something that might have been respect. That's the best cold bore shot I've seen in 30 years. Reese safed the rifle and stood. Her legs were shaky, not from the shot, from the weight of what that shot meant. "Do you trust me now, Master Chief?" Morrison's face was unreadable. "I trust that you can shoot. Trust is something different. Trust is built downrange. When everything's on fire and the plan's gone to hell, that's when I'll know if I can trust you." He started breaking down the spotting scope. "But you can shoot. That's a start." 2,100 hours came fast. The MH-47 Chinook helicopter was a beast of a machine. Twin rotors, enough lift capacity to haul a small truck. Loud enough to wake the dead. Reese sat in the red-lit interior, surrounded by Bravo team. 12 men, all of them bigger than her. All of them with more deployment time. All of them watching her with varying degrees of skepticism. Chief Derek Kane sat directly across from her. His kit was immaculate. Plate carrier loaded with magazines. Helmet mounted with night vision. The tools of close quarters violence arranged with the precision of a surgeon's instruments. He leaned forward, speaking loud enough to be heard over the rotor wash. "First time in hostile territory, Hartwell?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement designed to undermine. "Yes, Chief." "Thought so. You've got that look. Clean gear, new rifle, eyes wide open." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Don't worry, that'll change. Usually takes about 30 seconds after the first bullet cracks past your head." One of the other operators laughed. Reese kept her face neutral. Morrison sat next to her, cleaning his spotting scope with a lens cloth. He didn't look up. "Kane, how many of your team have seen someone make a 1,200-meter shot in 20-knot winds?" The laughter stopped. "Because I just watched Hartwell do it. Cold bore. First round. So maybe instead of running your mouth, You focus on not stepping on an IED when we hit the ground. Kane's face hardened. Master Chief, with all respect, Kane, range performance means she can shoot, which is literally her only job on this operation. Your job is to kick doors and clear rooms. Her job is to keep you alive while you do it. I suggest you let her do her job. The tension in the helicopter was thick enough to cut, but Kane backed down. Morrison's rank and reputation carried weight that Reese's shooting scores never would. The crew chief called out, 5 minutes. The team started final checks. Magazines seated, night vision powered on. Comms tested. The ritual of men preparing to step into the dark. Reese checked her own gear. The MK-22 was broken down in her pack. She'd reassemble it on the ridge. The SIG P226 pistol on her hip was loaded with 15 rounds of 9mm. Not much use at 1,200 meters, but comforting to have. Her plate carrier held 6 magazines of 7.62 NATO for the rifle, 120 rounds. If she needed more than that, something had gone catastrophically wrong. Morrison leaned close, speaking directly into her ear to be heard over the rotors. When we get on that ridge, I call the wind. You take the shots. We work as a team. No heroics. No proving anything. We observe, we report, we support. That's the mission. Clear? Clear, Master Chief. And Hartwell, if I tell you to shoot, you shoot. If I tell you to hold, you hold. I don't care what you see through that scope. I don't care what your gut tells you. You follow my commands. Understood? Reese met his eyes. There was something there, something harder than professional concern. Understood. The crew chief held up one finger. 1 minute. The helicopter banked hard, beginning its descent. Through the open ramp, Reese could see the mountains rising like broken teeth against the star-filled sky. Somewhere down there in that darkness was a valley full of men who wanted to kill them. And somewhere in that valley was the truth about whether she belonged here. The skids touched down. The ramp dropped. Go, go, go! Bravo team poured out into the night. Reese followed, her boots hitting California dirt for the first time on an operational mission. The rotor wash tried to blow her over. The noise was overwhelming. The darkness was absolute except for the green glow of night vision. Then the Chinook lifted, banking away, and the silence rushed in like a flood. They were alone in the mountains. Morrison's hand signal was clear. Follow me. Reese adjusted her pack and started climbing. 11,400 feet. The air was thin enough that every step felt like breathing through a straw. The temperature had dropped to -15 Celsius, cold enough that exposed skin would freeze in minutes, cold enough that the moisture in Reese's breath crystallized before it hit the ground. They'd been climbing for 3 hours, straight up. The ridge was a knife edge of shale and ice that seemed designed specifically to break ankles and punish hubris. Reese's quads burned, her lungs burned. The straps of her pack dug into her shoulders like claws. Morrison climbed ahead of her, moving with the steady, mechanical precision of a machine. 58 years old, and he was pulling away. Reese gritted her teeth and pushed harder. They crested the ridge just as the sky began to lighten. Not dawn, not yet, but the promise of dawn. That gray pre-light that turned the world into shades of charcoal and ash. Morrison held up a fist. Stop. Reese froze, dropping to a knee. Her breath came in ragged gasps that she tried to control. Breathing too hard meant noise. Noise meant compromise. Morrison pulled out his rangefinder and began scanning the valley below. Reese used the moment to pull the MK-22 from her pack and reassemble it. Barrel to receiver, bolt carrier group, magazine, scope mounted and zeroed. The familiar weight of the rifle was comforting, like holding hands with an old friend. Valley floor is 4,200 feet below us, Morrison whispered, his voice barely audible. Compound is at our 12 o'clock. Range 1,400 meters. I'm seeing heat signatures, multiple personnel, estimated 20 to 30 individuals. He passed the thermal binoculars to Reese. Through the optic, the world became a painting in heat. The compound glowed white-hot against the cold ground. Individual figures moved like ghosts, but it was the patterns that caught Reese's attention, the same patterns she'd seen in the satellite imagery. Master Chief, look at the western ridge. Those heat signatures, they're spaced exactly the same as the satellite photos, 40-meter intervals. And look at the gear. Those aren't hunting rifles. Those are belt-fed weapons. Morrison took the binos back, studying the signatures. DSHK heavy machine guns, 12 7mm, Russian-made. Those are anti-vehicle weapons. You don't use those for perimeter security unless you're expecting armored assault. Reese felt her pulse quicken. Or unless you're expecting helicopters. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, scanning the compound systematically. There's more. Look at the main structure, that roof. Reese looked through the thermal. She saw something that made her blood run cold. A large, rectangular heat signature. Steady, consistent. The thermal bloom of serious electrical equipment. That's not a generator, she said quietly. That's too big, too clean. That's a JETL system. Electronic Warfare Suite, Russian model. Jamming, signals intelligence, the works. Morrison lowered the binos. His face was grim. This isn't a militia compound, Hartwell. This is professional. Someone with access to military-grade hardware set this up. Should we call it in? Abort the mission? And tell the Admiral what? That we think maybe possibly the enemy has better gear than expected? Intel said low threat. We'd need concrete proof to abort at this point. Morrison set up the spotting scope, settling into a hide position behind a cluster of rocks. Reese deployed the bipod on the Mk-22 and settled in next to him. From here they had a perfect view of the entire valley, the compound, the approach routes, every possible avenue of attack or escape. Bravo team is 10 minutes out from phase line Alpha, Morrison said, checking his tactical display. Once they cross that line, they're committed. Point of no return. Reese scanned through her rifle scope, her training taking over, sector by sector, left to right, near to far, looking for threats, looking for anything that didn't belong. That's when she saw him. On the roof of the main compound building, a figure emerged from a doorway. But this wasn't a militia extremist in tactical surplus. This was someone wearing modern operational gear. Ops Corps helmet, Cry Precision combat pants, L3 night vision goggles flipped up on the helmet, a plate carrier loaded with magazine pouches that looked military issue. The figure moved to the edge of the roof, scanning the ridgeline with what looked like a high-powered spotting scope. Master Chief, Reese said quietly, main compound, rooftop. You seeing this? Morrison swung his spotting scope to the target. What the hell? Through the scope, Reese could see details now. The figure was Caucasian, maybe late 50s, short-cropped gray hair. The confidence in his movements spoke of years of training, decades. This wasn't some weekend warrior playing soldier. This was a professional. On his shoulder, she saw a patch. She couldn't make out the details at this range, but the shape was familiar. The outline of a sword, wings, the insignia of Delta Force. That's a Delta combat patch, Morrison breathed. Old style, the kind they stopped using in the mid-90s. Could be fake, stolen. Could be, or it could be real. The figure on the roof lowered his spotting scope and pulled out a radio. Reese watched his body language, the way he moved, the way he scanned. Professional, efficient, almost bored, like a man who had done this 1,000 times before. Then he turned, and for just a moment, the scope caught his face in profile. Morrison went rigid. No, that's not possible. Master Chief? Morrison's voice was barely a whisper. That's Vincent Crowe. He was my commanding officer in Somalia, October 3rd, 1993. He died in a vehicle accident in 2001. I was at the memorial service. Reese kept her eye to the scope, watching the figure on the roof. Are you sure? I served under him for 3 years. I'd know that face anywhere. Morrison's hands were shaking slightly on the spotting scope. If that's Crow, if he's alive, then he's been operating in the shadows for over 20 years. And if he's here, if he's running this operation, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The man on the roof raised his radio to his lips. Reese couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could read his body language. Calm, controlled, giving orders. Then he did something that made Reese's blood freeze. He turned and looked directly at their ridge, not scanning, not searching, looking, like he knew exactly where they were. And then he smiled. He raised his hand in a casual wave, mocking, confident. Master Chief, he's looking right at us. Impossible. We're concealed. Thermal blankets. No heat signature. No way he can... A high-pitched whine filled Reese's ears. Not external, internal, coming through her radio headset. A digital screech that spiked pain through her skull. Morrison ripped his headset off. Jammer, he just activated the electronic warfare suite. Reese tore her own headset away. The whine was everywhere now. Every radio frequency jammed. Every communication channel flooded with white noise. They were cut off. No contact with Bravo team. No contact with command. No way to warn anyone that they were walking into a trap set by a ghost who should have been dead for over 20 years. Through the scope, Reese watched Crow on the roof. He was still looking at their position, still smiling. Then he raised his hand in that same casual wave. He knew they were there. He'd always known. This wasn't an operation. It was an ambush. And they'd walked right into it. Morrison grabbed his tactical display, trying to raise Bravo team on alternate frequencies. Nothing. Just static. "They're deaf and blind," he said, "and they're 3 minutes from the kill zone." Reese watched through her scope as figures began moving on the valley floor. Not panicked, coordinated, taking up positions. The DSHK machine guns began traversing, aiming at the exact point where Bravo team would emerge from the pass. She could see the math playing out. 12 men walking into overlapping fields of fire from belt-fed weapons. IEDs wired along their approach. No communication, no warning. It would be a massacre. "Master Chief, we have to stop them." "We can't. No comms. No way to signal without giving away our position entirely. And ROE says we can't fire unless fired upon. They'll be dead before they can fire back." Morrison's face was hard. "Then they die following orders. That's the job, Hartwell. Sometimes the job means watching your friends die and not being able to do anything about it." Reese felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. A clarity, a certainty. "No, that's not your call. Someone has to make the call, and if you won't, I will." She swung the rifle, scanning for the machine gun position. Range, 1380 meters. Wind, 18 knots left to right. Temperature, -20 Celsius. The shot was possible, difficult, but possible. Morrison grabbed her shoulder. "Hartwell, if you fire that weapon, you will be court-martialed. You will lose your trident. You will lose everything you've worked for. Is that worth it?" Reese thought about Chief Kane's words on the helicopter, about being untested, about freezing under pressure. She thought about every instructor who had told her she didn't belong, every teammate who had looked at her and seen a liability instead of an asset. She thought about 12 men walking into certain death while she lay on a mountain and did nothing. Yes, she settled the crosshair on the DSAK machine gun. The gunner was already behind the weapon, already aiming. His finger was on the butterfly trigger. In 30 seconds, Bravo team would emerge into his field of fire. 20 seconds. Reese did the calculations. Elevation, windage, temperature, Coriolis effect, spin drift, all the variables that turn shooting into mathematics and mathematics into faith. 15 seconds. Morrison released her shoulder. When he spoke, His voice was quiet. If you're going to do this, do it right. Wind just shifted. Call it 20 knots now. Steady gust. Hold 4 mils left. 10 seconds. Reese adjusted her hold. The crosshair hovered in empty space left of the target. Trusting the math. Trusting the training. 5 seconds. She found the respiratory pause. The moment between heartbeats where the body was perfectly still. "Command," she said into the dead radio. "Signal is breaking up. I repeat, signal is..." She pulled the trigger. Below in the valley, the ambush had been spoiled. The militia was opening fire prematurely before Bravo team had reached the kill zone. Without the heavy machine gun, it was rifle fire. Sporadic, survivable. "Good hit," Morrison said quietly. He was watching through the spotting scope, his face unreadable. "Target neutralized, but you just kicked the hornet's nest." On the valley floor, Bravo team had taken cover behind a low stone wall. They were pinned down but alive. Through her scope, Reese could see Chief Kane yelling into his radio, coordinating his team, making them small, making them hard to hit, alive because she had violated orders. Through the scope, she found Crow on the rooftop again. He wasn't smiling now. He was furious, barking orders into his radio, pointing at their ridge with violent gestures that spoke of rage barely contained. "He's calling fire on our position," Morrison said. "We need to displace. Now." "Not yet. Bravo's still pinned. Hartwell, we have maybe 30 seconds before..." The whistle of an incoming mortar round cut him off. Reese rolled away from the rifle as the world exploded. The mortar round impacted 20 meters to their left, close enough that the concussion wave slammed into her like being hit by a car. Close enough that she felt the heat wash over her even through the thermal suit. Close enough that rock fragments peppered her position like hail thrown by an angry god. Her ears rang. The world became muffled cotton wrapped around a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. Morrison was pulling her arm, his mouth moving, yelling something she couldn't hear through the ringing. She grabbed the rifle and followed him, scrambling across the shale ridge as another mortar round impacted where they'd been lying 2 seconds before. Then another. The enemy gunners were bracketing their position, walking the fire up the ridge, trying to pin down the coordinates. They made it 15 meters before the next round hit. This one was closer. The explosion lifted Reese off her feet and threw her into a cluster of rocks. Her helmet slammed into stone. Stars exploded across her vision like fireworks going off inside her skull. The rifle was torn from her hands, clattering away across the ice. When her vision cleared, she was lying on her back, staring up at the gray, pre-dawn sky. Every part of her body hurt in that distant way that meant the adrenaline was doing its job, blocking the pain signals that would come later. Her ears were ringing so loud she couldn't hear her own breathing. She turned her head, the movement feeling like it took an hour. Morrison was 3 meters away, lying on his side. His leg was wrong. The angle was wrong. Blood was pooling beneath his right thigh, dark and spreading fast across the snow. A piece of shrapnel, superheated by the explosion, had punched through his quad muscle. It had missed the femoral artery by millimeters, but the bleeding was bad. Very bad. Reese crawled to him, her hands shaking. Not from fear, from the concussion. From her body trying to remember how to work. "Can't feel my foot," Morrison gasped. His face was gray with shock, the color of dirty snow. Reese ripped her individual first aid kit from her belt. The tourniquet was there, coiled like a snake. A strip of Velcro and a windlass that could mean the difference between life and death. She looped it high on his thigh, above the wound, and began cranking the windlass. Morrison screamed. The sound cut through the ringing in her ears like a knife through silk. 1 turn, 2 turns, 3. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. The tourniquet had done its job, cutting off blood flow to everything below it, saving his life while potentially costing him his leg. Another whistle. Incoming. "Move," Morrison gasped. Reese grabbed his drag handle. the reinforced loop sewn into the back of his plate carrier specifically for this purpose. 220 pounds of muscle in gear, dead weight. Physics said she couldn't move him. Every instructor who had ever doubted her said she couldn't move him. She pulled anyway. They moved a foot, then another. Her boots slipped on the ice. Her quads burned like someone had poured gasoline on the muscle fibers and lit a match. Her back screamed, but she kept pulling. The mortar round impacted where they had been lying 5 seconds before. The blast wave shoved Reese forward, slamming her chest into the rocks hard enough to crack ribs. But she didn't let go of the drag handle. Couldn't let go. If she let go, Morrison died. If Morrison died, it meant they were right about her. That she wasn't strong enough. That she didn't belong. She could see an outcropping of rock 20 meters away. Cover. Real cover. If she could get him there. If she could just... Morrison grabbed her wrist. His grip was weak, the fingers barely able to close. Leave me. Get the rifle. Provide cover for Bravo. That's the mission. Reese looked at him. At the blood. At the gray pallor of his face. She thought about every time someone had told her she wasn't strong enough. That she didn't have the physical capability. That when a 200-pound operator went down, she wouldn't be able to save him. "Shut up, Master Chief," she said. Her voice came out raw, scraped over vocal cords that felt like sandpaper. "I'm not leaving you." She heaved backward. Her quads burned. Her back screamed. The altitude made every breath feel like drowning in air too thin to sustain life. But she moved him, inch by agonizing inch, one pull at a time, refusing to think about the distance, refusing to think about the impossibility, just pulling, just moving. The mortars kept falling, walking up the ridge, searching. But Reese didn't stop. She pulled until her hands were raw inside her gloves. She pulled until her vision started to gray at the edges. She pulled until they reached the outcropping, and she could roll him into cover behind a boulder the size of a small car. She collapsed next to him, gasping. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. Every muscle trembled with exhaustion. Her body had gone past empty and found some reserve she didn't know existed. Morrison's eyes found hers. There was something in them, something like understanding. "You're not supposed to be able to do that," he whispered. "I'm not supposed to be here at all," Reese said, "but here I am." She crawled to the edge of the outcropping and looked down at the valley. The sun was rising now, real dawn, the kind that turned the mountains gold and made the snow sparkle like diamonds scattered by a generous hand. Through the morning light, she could see Bravo team still pinned, still taking fire. And she could see her rifle lying in the open, 20 meters away, where it had been torn from her hands. Without that rifle, she was useless. Just another body on a mountain, unable to help the men dying below. She looked at Morrison. "I have to get the rifle. You go out there, you're dead. They're bracketing the whole ridge. Next mortar volley will land right on top of it. Then I better be fast." Before he could argue, before she could talk herself out of it, Reese launched herself from cover. She sprinted across open ground. Mortars exploded behind her. 5 meters, the rifle. She grabbed it and dove as another round obliterated the spot where she'd been standing. She slammed back into cover, gasping. The rifle was intact. Somehow, impossibly. Morrison stared at her. "That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen." "Or the bravest," Reese gasped, checking the rifle. Scope intact. Action clear. She pulled the bolt back. A round was still chambered, ready to fire. Bravery and stupidity looked the same from a distance. Below in the valley, Bravo team was in trouble. She could see them through the scope now. Chief Kane was dragging a wounded operator behind the wall. Another SEAL was returning fire with his rifle, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. And on the eastern ridge, she saw movement, a new threat. A team of militia was setting up another machine gun. PKM, Russian-made, belt-fed, 7.62 millimeter rounds that could punch through body armor like paper. If they got that gun into action, it would have a perfect flanking angle on Bravo's position. They'd be able to enfilade the entire defensive line. Bravo team would be caught in a crossfire with nowhere to go. Range 1,640 meters, 1 mile, exactly 1 mile. The shot was impossible. Impossible in these conditions, with her body shaking from exertion and adrenaline, with her hands frozen and her vision still spotted from the concussion, with her ears still ringing and her breathing ragged. But Bravo team didn't need possible. They needed impossible. Reese settled into position behind the rifle. She forced her breathing to slow, forced her hands to steady. The shaking didn't stop completely, but it reduced. Enough. She dialed the elevation turret, 31.5 mils. More elevation than she'd ever used in her life. The bullet would arc so high it would be visible to the naked eye. Range? Morrison asked weakly. 1 mile. That's impossible. I know. She settled the crosshair on the PKM gunner, except she wasn't really aiming at him. She was aiming at empty space 3 feet left of him, trusting the wind, trusting the math, trusting everything she'd ever learned. The gunner racked the bolt on his weapon. In 5 seconds, he would open fire. Reese found the pause between heartbeats, found that place of perfect stillness that existed for just a fraction of a second. Her world narrowed to the reticle, the crosshair, the trigger. She pulled. The rifle roared. The recoil slammed into her shoulder. The bullet left the barrel at 3,000 feet per second and began its long arc across the valley. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Through the scope, Reese saw the PKM gunner's head snap back. A pink mist vaporized in the dawn light. The man crumpled over his weapon, dead before his brain could process what had happened. The shot had flown 1 mile through gusting wind and hit within an inch of her aim point. Morrison was staring at her. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's the best shot I've ever witnessed in 30 years. Reese worked the bolt, chambering a fresh round. I told you I could shoot, but she didn't have time to celebrate, because on the rooftop of the main compound, she saw Crow, and he was looking right at their position, right at the muzzle flash that had just given them away. He raised his radio, and Reese knew with absolute certainty that he wasn't calling for more mortars. He was calling for something worse. The sound reached them before the visual, a rhythmic thumping that she felt in her chest before her ears registered it. Deep, powerful, the unmistakable sound of helicopter rotors. Master Chief, she said quietly, we have company. Morrison was pale, his breathing shallow. The tourniquet had stopped the bleeding, but shock was setting in. Hypothermia wasn't far behind. His lips were starting to turn blue. What kind? He managed. Reese scanned the sky. There, coming low over the eastern ridge, using the terrain to mask its approach until the last moment. Not military. The profile was wrong. It was a civilian Bell 212 helicopter, the kind used for firefighting or medical transport. But this one had been modified. Stub wings had been welded to the fuselage. Mounted on those wings were M2 Browning 50 caliber machine guns. Civilian heli, she said, armed. Morrison closed his eyes. Of course it is. The armored helicopter swept across the valley, its rotor wash kicking up clouds of snow. It was conducting a search pattern, methodically working the ridgeline, looking for them. Crow had called in the big gun, and now there was nowhere to hide. A thermal sight on that bird would light them up like flares against the cold rock. Reese grabbed her radio handset, hoping against hope that the jammer had a gap in its coverage. Maybe the angle of the ridge was providing some shielding from the directional antenna. She keyed the mic. TOC, this is Sierra 1. We are compromised. Enemy gunship inbound. Request immediate air support. How copy? Static. White noise. The jammer was still active, crushing their transmissions. She tried again. Any station, this is Sierra 1. Emergency traffic. We have wounded and are under attack by... A burst of static cut through, followed by a voice. Distant, distorted, but audible. Sierra 1, TOC. Read you broken and garbled. Say again your traffic. Reese's heart surged. The signal was weak, but it was there. TOC, Sierra 1. Sierra 2 is critical casualty, femoral injury. We need immediate medevac. Enemy has deployed attack helicopter and is actively searching for our position. Request. The radio went dead. The jammer had found the frequency and crushed it like an insect under a boot heel. Reese slammed the handset against the rock in frustration. So close. They had been so close. But somewhere in that broken transmission, something had gotten through. The tone, the urgency, the coordinates. Someone had heard. Someone was coming. She just had to keep Morrison alive long enough. The helicopter was closer now, circling. The pilot was good, staying out of effective rifle range, while the gunner scanned with thermal optics, looking for the heat signature of 2 Americans hiding in the rocks. Thermal blanket, Morrison said. His voice was weak, but lucid. In my pack, left side pouch. Reese found it, a thin sheet of metallic fabric designed to block infrared signatures. She draped it over both of them, tucking the edges under rocks to keep the wind from tearing it away. It wouldn't make them invisible, but it might buy them time. Through a gap in the fabric, she watched the helicopter complete another orbit, nearly invulnerable to small arms fire with its armor plating. Against 2 people with a sniper rifle and a pistol, it was overkill of the highest order. The helicopter's nose dipped as it began another search pass. Closer this time. The rotor wash reached their position, threatening to tear away the thermal blanket. Reese held it down, her frozen fingers digging into the fabric. If it blew away, they were dead. The gunner would spot them instantly and unleash hell. The helicopter passed overhead, so close she could see the rivets on its armored belly. So close she could see the gunner in the cockpit, head down, staring at his thermal display. Then it was past, banking away to search another sector of the ridge. Reese released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. That was close, Morrison whispered. Too close. We got lucky. The thermal blanket worked. Luck is a finite resource in combat. Eventually it runs out, and when it does, people die. Reese pulled the blanket aside just enough to look at Morrison. His face was gray. His eyes were starting to glaze. The combination of blood loss, shock, and hypothermia was shutting down his body one system at a time. She checked the tourniquet, still tight, still holding, but he needed real medical care. A surgeon, blood transfusions, warmth, things that didn't exist on a frozen mountain in California. Stay with me, Master Chief, she said, slapping his cheek lightly. Don't you dare check out on me. His eyes focused slightly. Reese. It was the first time he'd used her first name. What? He reached into his vest with a trembling hand and pulled out a photograph. The edges were worn. The image was faded, but Reese could see it clearly. A young woman in Army combat uniform, dark hair pulled back, strong features, a confident smile. The woman looked like she could have been Reese's older sister. Your mother, Morrison said. Lieutenant Julia Hartwell. She was our combat medic in Somalia. 1993, October 3rd. Reese took the photo with numb fingers. She'd seen pictures of her mother before. Official photos, dress uniform portraits. But never like this. Never in the field. Never with that look in her eyes that said she knew exactly what she was walking into and chose to do it anyway. She saved 12 men that day, Morrison continued. His voice was distant now, lost in memory. We were pinned down in the Bakara market, surrounded, taking casualties. Your mother ran through machine gun fire 3 times to drag wounded soldiers to cover. 3 times. No body armor, just her aid bag and her courage. What happened to her? Reese asked, though part of her already knew. Vincent Crow happened to her. Morrison coughed, a wet sound that made Reese's stomach clench. Crow was our commander, Delta Force, the best of the best. But he was reckless. He pushed too hard, went too deep into enemy territory without proper support. When the ambush came, when we were surrounded, he called for your mother to come forward, to treat a wounded operator who was already dead. His hand gripped the photograph. She knew it was suicide. I heard her on the radio. She said the man was gone, that advancing would just create more casualties. Crow ordered her anyway. Direct order. She had to follow it. That's the military. You follow orders even when they're wrong, especially when they're wrong. Reese felt something cold settle in her chest. She went? She went. And an RPG hit the building she was in. We found her body 3 hours later, along with the dead operator she'd been sent to save. Morrison's eyes found Reese's. Crow wrote it up as heroic action, got her a Bronze Star with Valor posthumously, made himself look good in the after-action report. 2 weeks later, Crow disappeared, declared KIA when his vehicle hit an IED. But there was no body, just pieces of a vehicle. He faked his death. He faked his death, reinvented himself, started selling his skills to the highest bidder. The pieces were falling into place now, the personal nature of this ambush, the way Crow had known exactly where to look for them. He knows who I am, Reese said. He's known since you applied to BUD/S. Crow still has contacts in the intelligence community. When Julia Hartwell's daughter tried out for the SEALs, word got around. He's been tracking your career, waiting for the right moment. Morrison's breathing was getting more labored. This whole operation, the nukes, the ambush, it's all for you. You were always the real target, Reese. The rest is just business. The helicopter made another pass, farther away this time. The pilot was expanding his search pattern, working outward from the last known position. Reese watched it through the gap in the thermal blanket, her mind racing. Crow had orchestrated this entire thing. The leaked intelligence, the ambush, even getting her assigned to Overwatch had probably been part of his plan. He'd maneuvered her into position like a chess piece, and now he was moving in for checkmate. Her radio crackled, not the encrypted tactical frequency, the open emergency channel that anyone could monitor. Crow's voice came through, clear, mocking. Reese Hartwell, I know you can hear me. Your mother's daughter, Julia's little girl, all grown up and playing soldier. Reese grabbed the handset but didn't respond. Answering would confirm her position. I've been watching you, Reese, tracking your progress. You're good. Better than your mother was. That mile shot? Impressive. Reminded me of your old man. Reese's hand tightened on the handset. Oh, didn't Morrison tell you? I knew your father too. Army Ranger, good man. Died in a training accident at Fort Benning when you were 3. At least, that's what they told you. Morrison grabbed Reese's wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. Don't listen to him. He's trying to get in your head, make you angry, make you make mistakes. But Reese was already past anger. She was in a place beyond emotion, a cold, clear space where there was only the mission, the target, the shot. Crow's voice continued, warm and conversational. But we both know accidents happen all the time in the military, especially to people who ask too many questions about what happened to their wives in Somalia. Your father started digging into Julia's death, started asking why she was ordered forward. Who gave that order? He was getting close to the truth. The words hit like physical blows. I couldn't let him expose what really happened that day, Reese. Just like I can't let you walk off this mountain. You're too much like both of them. Too stubborn, too brave, too willing to die for people who don't deserve it. Reese forced herself to breathe, to think, to not let the rage consume her. I'm giving you a choice, Reese. Same choice I gave your mother. Leave Morrison. Walk away. There's an extraction point 2 kilometers north of your position. I'll let you reach it. You can go home. Tell them you got separated in the fighting. No one will question it. You survive." The helicopter banked back toward their position. "Or you can stay with the old man. Try to drag him out like your mother tried to save that dead operator. And you'll die just like she did. Brave and stupid and utterly pointless. Your choice. You have 60 seconds to decide." The radio went silent. Reese looked at Morrison. He was watching her with eyes that had seen too much death. Too many good people making bad choices because it was the right thing to do. "Go," he said quietly. "Complete the mission. Get back to base. Tell them what happened here. That's how you beat him, not by dying on this ridge." Reese checked the tourniquet on his leg. Still tight. Then she checked her rifle. 3 rounds left in the magazine. She had 2 more magazines in her vest. 33 rounds total. Not much, but it would have to be enough. "I'm not my mother," she said. "Reese, my mother followed a bad order and died. I'm not following orders anymore. I'm making my own calls." She grabbed Morrison's drag handle and started pulling him toward the backside of the ridge, away from the valley, away from the helicopter's search pattern. The terrain was rougher here, steeper, but it offered more cover, more options. Morrison was dead weight, 220 pounds of muscle and gear. Her instructors at BUD/S had been very clear about the limits of the human body, about what female bodies could and couldn't do. Reese didn't care about limits. She pulled. Her boots slipped on the icy shale. Her quads burned like someone had injected them with acid. Her lower back screamed. Every breath at this altitude was like inhaling broken glass. But she kept moving, 1 foot, then another, dragging him inch by agonizing inch. The helicopter appeared over the ridge, its massive rotor blades chopping the thin air. The pilot had spotted movement. The gunship pivoted, nose dipping. The .50 caliber machine gun in the chin mount tracking toward them. Reese dove, pulling Morrison with her. They tumbled down a steep slope, rolling, slamming into rocks. The world spun, sky and stone and snow mixing together in a kaleidoscope of pain. The machine gun opened fire, a sound like a giant zipper being torn open. 50 caliber rounds chewed up the ridge where they'd been lying 2 seconds before. Each round was the size of a man's finger. Each impact threw up a geyser of rock and ice. They hit the bottom of the slope in a tangle of limbs and equipment. Reese's helmet had been torn off somewhere in the fall. Blood ran down the side of her face from a gash above her eyebrow. The rifle was still slung across her chest. Somehow, miraculously, Morrison wasn't moving. His eyes were closed. For a terrible moment, Reese thought he was dead. Then she saw his chest rise. Shallow, weak, but breathing. Above them, the helicopter circled like a vulture. The pilot was repositioning for another gun run. Reese looked around desperately. They were in a narrow ravine, sheer walls on both sides. No cover, no escape route. The helicopter's shadow fell over them as it lined up its approach. This was it. This was how it ended. Not in some heroic last stand, but pinned in a ditch, while a helicopter turned them into red mist on white snow. Then the sky tore open with sound. An FA-18 Super Hornet screamed across the valley at 500 knots, its afterburner painting a trail of fire across the dawn sky. The pilot had come in low, using the terrain to mask his approach. Now he pulled vertical, climbing hard. The helicopter pilot saw him too late. Missile launch! An AIM-9X Sidewinder dropped from the FA-18's wing, ignited, and streaked toward the helicopter in a corkscrew of white smoke. The helicopter pilot threw his aircraft into a desperate evasive maneuver, dumping flares and chaff. The missile locked on a flare and detonated in a ball of orange flame 50 meters behind the helicopter. But the FA-18 wasn't done. The pilot rolled inverted and dove, his 20mm cannon spooling up, the air filled with tracer rounds, a river of fire that reached down from the sky and touched the helicopter's tail rotor. Metal shredded, the helicopter spun violently, its pilot fighting for control. Splash one bell, the F/A-18 pilot called, his voice calm and professional. Sierra 1, Viper 2-1, we have your position. Cavalry's here. The helicopter was spiraling now, smoke pouring from its tail section. The pilot managed to level it just enough to avoid a complete crash, bringing it down hard on the valley floor, half a kilometer away. The impact crumpled the landing gear, the rotors disintegrated, but the crew compartment held. Men poured out of the wreck, scrambling for cover. Reese keyed her radio with shaking hands. Viper 2-1, Sierra 1. That was outstanding shooting. We have one urgent surgical. Request immediate medevac. Negative, Sierra. Airspace is still contested. We're working to suppress remaining threats, but we can't bring in a helo until we clear the valley. ETA on safe extraction is 30 mics. 30 minutes. Morrison didn't have 30 minutes. Reese looked down at Morrison. His skin was waxy, the color of old candle wax left too long in the sun. His breathing was barely perceptible, chest rising and falling in irregular rhythms that spoke of a body shutting down one system at a time. The hypothermia and shock were winning. Even if they got him to a hospital in the next 5 minutes, he might not make it. Copy, Viper. Sierra 1 will hold position and await extraction. But she couldn't just sit here and watch him die. There had to be something, some way to buy him time. She pulled off her own jacket and wrapped it around Morrison's torso, trying to preserve what little core heat he had left. Then she began packing snow around his body, creating an insulation layer. It seemed counterintuitive, using snow to keep someone warm, but the air trapped in the snow would insulate better than direct exposure to the wind. Her father had taught her that when they used to hunt elk in the Montana mountains, before the training accident that wasn't an accident. Morrison's eyes flickered open. Did you just put snow on me? Survival technique keeps your core temperature from dropping further. Your father teach you that? Yeah. The word came out harder than she intended. Morrison's hand found hers, squeezed weakly. Crow might have been lying about your father, psychological warfare. Or he was telling the truth. Reese pulled out her rifle and scanned the valley below. Either way, he's going to answer for it. For my mother, for my father, for all of it. Through the scope, she could see the compound. Bravo team was moving through it systematically now, clearing rooms, securing the area. Chief Kane was coordinating the operation, his hand signals crisp and professional, despite the blood-soaked bandage on his shoulder. And somewhere in that chaos, Vincent Crow was running. The professional part of Reese's brain said to let him go. Focus on keeping Morrison alive. That was the priority. Crow was just one man. They'd catch him eventually. But the other part, the part that had grown up looking at her mother's picture and wondering why, the part that had joined the SEALs to honor a legacy she barely understood, that part wanted blood. Movement caught her eye on the northern ridge. A figure moving fast across the snow, using tactical bounds, cover to cover. The movement of someone who knew exactly where the sniper was and exactly how to avoid being shot. Crow. Reese tracked him through the scope. Range, 800 meters. Moving target, difficult but not impossible. She had 2 rounds left in the magazine, 1 in the chamber, 3 chances. Her finger found the trigger. She started to apply pressure. Then she stopped. If she took this shot, if she killed Crow, it would be murder. He was fleeing, not engaging, not threatening anyone at this moment. Shooting him would be execution. And no matter what he'd done, no matter what he deserved, she was not an executioner. She was a SEAL, and SEALs followed rules, even when the rules protected monsters. Reese lowered the rifle. Crow reached the ridgeline and disappeared over the crest. Gone. Escaped. Free to sell his skills to the next terrorist. Free to kill more Americans. Free to orchestrate more nightmares. But alive, which meant he could be tracked, hunted, brought to justice the right way. Morrison's eyes were open, watching her. You had the shot. I know. Why didn't you take it? She thought about her answer, about all the reasons, about rules and justice and the difference between soldier and murderer. Because I'm better than him. Morrison nodded slowly, a smile ghosting across his pale lips. Your mother would be proud. The sound of rotors echoed across the valley, different from the bell, friendlier. The distinctive thump of American helicopters. Two of them, MH-60 Blackhawks coming in fast and low, their profiles sharp against the brightening sky. The radio crackled. Not the encrypted frequency, the emergency channel. Sierra 1, this is Dustoff 3-1. We are inbound for medevac. Viper flight has cleared the airspace. Pop smoke when you have visual. Reese grabbed a smoke grenade from her vest and pulled the pin. Purple smoke billowed into the morning air, marking their position like a beacon of hope in a landscape of death. The first Black Hawk flared over their location, the rotor wash turning the world into a hurricane of snow and noise and possibility. A PJ, a pararescue jumper, fast roped down, his medical bag already open before his boots hit the ground. He took one look at Morrison, and his professional calm cracked slightly. Jesus, how long has he been like this? 90 minutes, maybe more. Tourniquet is holding. The PJ was already checking vital signs, pulling out IV equipment, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. You did good. Tourniquet placement is perfect. He's hypothermic and shocky, but he's alive. We'll get him stable. A second PJ descended, moving to Reese. You injured? She looked down at herself. Blood on her face from the head wound. Her hands were torn and bleeding inside the gloves. Her ribs ached from where the shrapnel had grazed her. Her left arm hung at a funny angle that suggested something was broken or dislocated. I'm fine. Ma'am, with respect, you look like you fell down a mountain. I did, twice, still fine. The PJ started to argue, then seemed to recognize the look in her eyes. The look that said she would stand here until her teammate was safe, and if you try to treat me first, I will make your life difficult. Okay, we'll load him first. They strapped Morrison to a Stokes litter and connected it to the hoist cable. As he was lifted toward the hovering Black Hawk, his hand reached out and grabbed Reese's sleeve. You carried me, he said, his voice barely audible over the rotors. They said you couldn't, but you did. I told you, Master Chief, I'm not supposed to be here at all. But here I am. He smiled, actually smiled. Reaper. Then he was rising into the air, spinning slowly on the cable, disappearing into the belly of the helicopter that would carry him to surgery, to survival, to a future he wouldn't have had without her. The PJ grabbed Reese's arm. Your turn, she started to argue, then her legs gave out. The adrenaline was wearing off like a drug, leaving her system. The pain was rushing in to fill the space, no longer held at bay by the body's natural defenses. The PJ caught her before she hit the ground. I got you. You did good. You can let go now. Reese felt the cable take her weight, felt herself rising off the mountain, leaving behind the blood and the snow and the place where she had become something different than what she was before. Below her, the battlefield was already becoming abstract, small. The compound where men had died, the ridge where she'd made the impossible shot, the ravine where she'd nearly been killed. It was all getting smaller, farther away. But the weight of it wasn't getting any lighter. She closed her eyes and let the PJs pull her into the aircraft. Strong hands grabbed her vest and hauled her onto the deck. Someone was wrapping her in a thermal blanket. Someone else was checking her vitals. The helicopter was warm, safe. The sounds of combat replaced by the sounds of salvation. She opened her eyes. Chief Derek Kane was there, sitting against the bulkhead. His uniform was torn and bloody. A field dressing covered his shoulder. But he was alive. His whole team was alive, crammed into the Blackhawk's interior like sardines grateful to be breathing. He met her eyes across the helicopter cabin. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Kane did something Reese had never seen him do. He nodded. just once. A slight dip of the head that acknowledged everything that had happened on that ridge. The warning shot that had saved his life. The mile shot that had broken the ambush. The refusal to leave a wounded teammate. "Clear," Kane said to the crew chief. "We're all home." The Black Hawk banked hard, beginning its turn towards safety. But before it could accelerate away, the crew chief screamed, "Missile launch! Brake right! Brake right!" Reese jerked upright, ignoring the pain that lanced through her ribs. Through the open door, she saw it, a smoke trail spiraling up from the valley floor. Not from the crashed helicopter, from the compound rooftop. Crow. He was standing there, clearly visible even at this distance. A Stinger missile launcher on his shoulder, the weapon's seeker head already locked onto the Black Hawk's heat signature. The pilot threw the aircraft into a violent, evasive maneuver. Flares popped from the defensive suite, white-hot decoys tumbling through the air like falling stars. But Reese knew the math. She'd studied Stinger capabilities. The missile was faster than the helicopter. The flares might confuse it. Might. 50-50 odds at best. Or everyone on this bird would die. "Crew chief," Reese shouted over the alarm klaxons. "Open that door wider." "Ma'am, we're evading. You can't." "Now!" The crew chief hit the release. The door slid fully open. Wind screamed into the cabin. 50 knots of chaos and noise. Reese grabbed a cargo strap with her broken arm. Pain exploded white-hot through her vision, so intense it nearly knocked her unconscious. But she held on, leaned out into the slipstream. Her right hand found her Sig Sauer P226. 15 rounds, 9mm. Effective range, maybe 50 meters against a stationary target. The Stinger missile was 800 meters away, closing at Mach 2. Over 1,500 miles per hour. It was impossible. Even more impossible than the mile shot. A handgun against a hypersonic missile. Physics said no. Logic said no. Every instructor who had ever taught her ballistics said no. But Morrison's voice echoed in her head. "That's the best shot I've ever witnessed in 30 years. Reese didn't aim at the helicopter. She didn't aim at Crow. She aimed at a point in empty space where math and intuition and something beyond reason told her the missile would be in exactly half a second. Leading a target, just like shooting skeet. Except the skeet was traveling supersonic, and if she missed, 12 people died. She pulled the trigger. 5 rounds. 6, 7, 8. On the 8th round, the universe held its breath. The 9mm bullet, traveling at 1,000 feet per second, intersected the Stinger's flight path. At the exact microsecond, the missile crossed through that invisible point in space. The bullet struck the warhead's impact fuse. The missile detonated 800 meters from the helicopter. The shock wave rocked the Black Hawk violently, throwing Reese against the bulkhead hard enough to crack more ribs. But they were far enough away. The blast dissipated across distance. The aircraft stabilized. The alarm stopped screaming. They were alive. The crew chief pulled Reese back from the door, his face white as paper. "Did you just—" "No," Reese said quickly, holstering the pistol with shaking hands. "Lucky malfunction. Atmospheric interference. Detonated early. That's what goes in the report." The pilot's voice came over the intercom, shaken. "Sierra 1, I don't know what just happened back there, but we're clear. Heading to San Diego." Kane was staring at her across the cabin. So were the other operators. They'd all seen it, the impossible shot with a handgun that had saved all their lives. Reese met Kane's eyes. Atmospheric conditions, unpredictable at altitude. Kane slowly nodded, understanding passing between them. "Right. I'll write it up that way in my after-action." Morrison was conscious on his stretcher, staring at her with something like awe. "That shot didn't happen." "Exactly," Reese repeated, louder this time. "Everyone clear? The missile malfunctioned. Random detonation. End of story." One by one, the operators nodded. Some things were better left off the official record. Some things would only invite questions nobody wanted to answer. Reese looked out the window one last time. On the compound rooftop below, Crow stood motionless, the empty Stinger launcher at his feet. Even at this distance, she could read his body language. Shock, disbelief, the realization that he'd just been beaten by something he couldn't comprehend. Not by firepower, not by luck, but by pure skill that transcended anything he'd ever seen. The Black Hawk banked away, accelerating toward base. Reese leaned her head back against the vibrating bulkhead and finally allowed herself to close her eyes. They weren't home yet. There would be debriefings, investigations, questions about violated orders and severed communications. And somewhere out there, Vincent Crow was still alive, still free, still carrying the truth about her mother and her father. But for now, they were alive. All of them. Sometimes that was enough. The flight to Naval Base San Diego took 35 minutes. Reese spent most of it watching the medics work on Morrison, counting each shallow breath, each beep of the cardiac monitor. When his eyes opened briefly and found hers, she nodded. Still here, still fighting. The helicopter touched down on the pad. Medical personnel rushed forward with gurneys. Reese watched them load Morrison into an ambulance, lights already flashing as it raced toward the surgical ward. Then she turned to face her reception committee. Admiral Rebecca Stone stood 20 feet away, flanked by 2 Marine military police officers and a Navy JAG officer in service-dress blues. Her face could have been carved from granite. Reese climbed down from the helicopter unsteadily. Her left arm was definitely broken. Every breath sent spikes of pain through her ribs, but she kept her spine straight, maintained her military bearing. She stopped 3 paces from the Admiral and came to attention as best she could. "Ma'am, Captain Reese Hartwell reporting." Admiral Stone's jaw worked. "Master Chief Morrison's prognosis?" "Unknown, ma'am. The PJs said he had a chance. The tourniquet held. We got him out in time." "Because you refused a direct order to leave him and establish overwatch on Crow's escape route." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. "Yes, ma'am. Because you severed communications when ordered to abandon your wounded spotter." "Atmospheric interference, ma'am." "Don't." Admiral Stone's voice cut like a blade. "Don't insult my intelligence. You unplug your transmit cable. You deliberately cut communications. You violated every protocol in the book." Reese met her eyes. "Yes, ma'am, I did." The admission seemed to surprise her. "You also violated rules of engagement by firing before receiving hostile fire. You disobeyed tactical command. You compromised your position. And you allowed a high-value target to escape rather than complete your assigned mission." "Yes, ma'am." "In a normal unit, that means court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison time." Reese said nothing. The Admiral was right. Admiral Stone stepped closer. "But this isn't a normal unit. Master Chief Morrison submitted a report before surgery. He stated you demonstrated exceptional judgment under impossible circumstances, that your decision to engage the DSHK prevented Bravo's destruction, that your mile shot was the finest marksmanship he'd witnessed in 30 years. She paused and something in her expression shifted. Chief Kane submitted a similar statement. Every member of Bravo team has confirmed that without your actions, they would not have survived. The nuclear material is secured. The militia cell is eliminated. By any objective measure, the mission succeeded. Reese felt something shift inside her chest. Not hope yet, but possibility. However, there are questions. How a former Delta Force operator came to work with domestic terrorists. How he knew we were coming. How atmospheric interference happens every time you receive an order you don't like. Admiral Stone gestured to the JAG officer. Captain Morrison will debrief you. You will tell him everything. Then we decide what happens next. Ma'am, Reese said carefully, Master Chief Morrison told me things about Crow, about my mother. Something flickered in Admiral Stone's eyes, knowledge she'd had all along. I know your mother was a hero, What happened in Somalia was tragic. What happened to your father afterward was equally tragic. Both events have been investigated thoroughly. Crow said, Crow is a ghost, a man supposedly dead for over 20 years. Whatever he told you was psychological warfare designed to compromise your judgment, which worked because you let him escape instead of taking the shot. Reese's hands clenched at her sides. He was fleeing, not engaging. Shooting him would have been following ROE for a hostile combatant with intelligence value. Instead, he's gone. We may never find him. The Admiral turned to leave, then paused. Get medical treatment. Rest. We'll talk after the debrief. She walked away, leaving Reese standing in the California sun with two MPs and a JAG officer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Captain Morrison, the JAG officer, stepped forward. Thin, wire-rimmed glasses, the demeanor of someone who'd rather be reviewing contracts than dealing with field operators. Captain Hartwell, we need a formal debrief, but first, you're getting medical attention. You're bleeding on my investigation. Reese looked down. Blood was dripping from her fingertips onto the tarmac, mixing with the oil stains and the marks left by 1,000 helicopters. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and the particular despair that comes from fluorescent lighting. A corpsman cleaned her head wound, 12 stitches. X-rays confirmed a radial fracture in her left arm. They put her in a cast from knuckles to elbow. Master Chief Morrison? Reese asked. The corpsman hesitated. Surgery, that's all I know. Which meant bad. If it was good news, they'd say so. After medical, Reese was confined to quarters. Not under arrest, but not free either. She spent 2 weeks in limbo. Debriefings with Captain Morrison, 6-hour sessions recording every detail. The shot that violated ROE, the refusal to abandon Morrison, the choice not to kill Crow. The JAG officer's report was clinical, facts without judgment, presented for the board that would decide her fate. At night, Reese couldn't sleep. The questions Crow had planted haunted her. Your father started asking questions. Then he died. She accessed the classified database, technically against her confinement terms, but she was past caring about technicalities. Service record, Captain Michael Hartwell, 75th Ranger Regiment, died March 15, 1994. Training accident, Fort Benning. Parachute malfunction during night jump. She dug deeper. Accident investigation file. Parachute inspected 2 days before jump. Passed all checks. Weather conditions, optimal. No mechanical failure found. Conclusion, probable cause, jumper error. Her father was a ranger with over 200 jumps. He didn't make jumper errors. She found the timeline. Julia Hartwell died October 3, 1993, Somalia. Michael Hartwell started requesting Somalia after-action reports 2 weeks later. Filed FOIA requests for command decisions. Contacted other survivors. 5 months of questions. Then a training accident with no clear cause. Reese pulled up financial records. 6 months after her father's death, $50,000 deposited to an offshore account linked to Crow's network. Blood money. She closed the laptop, hands shaking. Not with grief, with cold certainty. Crow had killed both her parents, and she was going to prove it. Someone knocked on her door. Chief Derek Kane stood in the hallway, out of uniform. His shoulder was bandaged beneath a civilian shirt. Hartwell, got a minute? Sure, Chief. He entered, looking uncomfortable in a way that men rarely did around her anymore. She'd earned something on that mountain. Respect, maybe, or at least acknowledgement. He pulled out an envelope. I've been thinking about the ridge, about your choices. He held out the envelope. This is my statement for the board. I'm recommending you for a Silver Star, for saving my team, for refusing to abandon Morrison, for demonstrating the courage we should all aspire to. Reese took the envelope, her hands steady despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. Chief, I violated. You saved lives. That's what matters. The rest is paperwork. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. The board hearing is in 3 days. Admiral's pushing for discipline, but you've got support, more than you realize. After he left, Reese opened the envelope. 2 pages from Kane's perspective. The ambush, the warning shot, the mile shot, the refusal to leave Morrison. The final paragraph made her throat tighten. Captain Hartwell demonstrated extraordinary valor under impossible circumstances. She is exactly the kind of operator we need, not despite being a woman, but because she brings capabilities that make us all better. I would serve with her again without hesitation. 3 days later, Reese stood before the board. 5 senior officers sat behind a long table. Admiral Stone at center, American flag behind them, the weight of military justice pressing down like atmospheric pressure at depth. Reese sat on the bench outside while they deliberated, staring at her hands. The cast was heavy. Everything was heavy. Kane walked past, stopped. For what it's worth, I meant every word in that statement. Thanks, Chief. You saved my team. Whatever they decide in there, you'll always have our respect. He paused. And Hartwell, if they cashier you out, teams lose, not you. After he left, Morrison rolled up in his wheelchair, legs still in a brace, but his eyes were clear. How bad? He asked. Don't know yet. Hartwell, Reese, look at me. She did. I've served 30 years, seen a lot of operators, good ones, great ones. You're different. You don't just follow orders, you make the hard calls when others won't. That's what's getting me court-martialed, or what's making you the kind of leader we need. He gripped her hand. Whatever happens, I'm proud to have served with you. The door opened. The JAG officer. Captain Hartwell, the board is ready. Morrison squeezed her hand once more. Go get him, Reaper. She stood, walked back in. Whatever came next, she'd face it standing. Captain Morrison, the JAG officer, presented evidence. Violations. Timeline. Facts laid out like evidence at a crime scene. Then witnesses. Master Chief Morrison in his wheelchair, leg healing but scarred. Kane at attention. Bravo team operators, one by one, speaking about the shots that saved them. The board deliberated 2 hours behind closed doors, while Reese waited in the hallway, staring at recruiting posters that promised adventure and honor and never mentioned the price. Finally, they called her back. Admiral Stone held an unopened folder. Her face was unreadable, carved from the same stone as the mountains where everything had changed. Captain Reese Hartwell, this board has reviewed your actions during Operation Crimson Sanctuary. We've considered the protocol violations, the insubordination, the refusal to follow direct orders. She opened the folder. We've also considered the results. 12 American lives saved, nuclear material secured, a domestic terrorist cell destroyed, successful rescue of a critically wounded teammate against overwhelming odds. She looked up and something in her expression had shifted. The finding of this board, while your methods violated protocols, your judgment was sound. Your actions prevented catastrophic loss of American lives. Therefore, you will receive a formal reprimand for the communications violation. This will be in your permanent record. Reese felt her stomach drop. A reprimand could end her career before it truly started. However, Admiral Stone continued, and now there was something almost like approval in her voice. You are also awarded the Silver Star for conspicuous gallantry, for exceptional courage under fire and tactical decisions that saved American lives at great personal risk. She stood. The board stood with her. The reprimand will be accompanied by a classified commendation letter stating your actions were taken in the best judgment of a combat operator facing impossible circumstances. Future promotion boards will have access to both documents. Admiral Stone's expression softened slightly, the granite cracking just enough to show the human beneath. Rules exist for a reason, Captain, but so does judgment. You demonstrated both the courage to act and the wisdom to know when rules serve the mission and when they don't. That's the mark of an exceptional operator. She extended her hand across the table. Reese shook it, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settling into something she could carry. Dismissed. Get back to training. Your team needs you. Outside, Morrison waited on crutches. His leg was wrapped, healing, slowly, but healing. How'd it go? Reprimand and the Silver Star. Morrison laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a mountain. Most SEAL thing ever. They punish you and medal you simultaneously. 2 days after the board hearing, Reese visited Morrison in the hospital. He was sitting up, color back in his face, leg elevated but healing. Heard you got the star, he said, and the reprimand. Most SEAL thing ever, he smiled, then turned serious. I also heard you've been digging into Crow, into your father. Reese didn't deny it. The payment 6 months after Dad died. It's in Crow's network. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Your father was a good man. He deserved better than what happened. They both did. I'm going after him, Master Chief. When you're cleared, if you still want in, I'm in. We finish this the right way. He met her eyes. But Reese, when we find him, we bring him back alive. Let him face every family he destroyed. Let him answer in a courtroom, not a body bag. That's the plan. Good, because you're better than him. Don't let revenge make you into what he is. She nodded, stood to leave. Reese? Yeah? Your mother would be proud, not just of the shots, of the choices. She had to turn away so he wouldn't see her eyes. 6 months later, Reese stood on the Coronado sniper range. Morning mist made the world gray and soft, the ocean visible in the distance like a promise of something beyond the land. Before her, a young woman lay prone behind a rifle. 22 years old, small, wiry, eyes holding desperate determination Reese remembered from her own early days. The recruit was shaking, breathing too fast, gripping the rifle too tight like she was afraid it would escape. I can't find the wind, the recruit said, her voice tight. It's too variable. I'm going to miss. Reese knelt beside her, careful of her healed left arm. The cast was off, full strength returning, the bones stronger where it had broken, the way bones always were. Wind isn't your enemy, it's information. Listen to it, feel it, trust your training. The recruit looked at her, and Reese saw herself reflected in those eyes. What if I fail? Reese thought about a frozen ridge, an impossible shot, choices made between heartbeats that changed everything. Then you adjust, send another round. We don't fail unless we quit, and we don't quit. The recruit breathed, settled, found the respiratory pause where the body was perfectly still. She fired. Downrange, steel rang clear. Perfect hit at 800 meters. The recruit's face lit up like sunrise. I did it. No. Morrison's voice came from behind, walking without crutches now, just a slight limp that would probably never fully disappear. He approached, steady and sure. You proved you can shoot. Now do it when people shoot back. That's when it matters. He looked at Reese. Not the question of whether she was ready for training, the question of whether she was ready for what came next. Ready for the mission they'd planned for months. Intelligence gathered piece by piece. Vincent Crow's location in a compound outside Reno, Nevada. The unauthorized operation to bring a ghost to justice. Ready? He asked. They walked from the range together. The sun burned off mist, turned ocean gold. Reese thought about her mother, her father. Questions still needing answers. Justice delayed but not denied. Vincent Crow had run for over 20 years. 20 years hiding. 20 years thinking he'd escaped. But Reese Hartwell wasn't her mother. She didn't follow bad orders, didn't accept easy answers, didn't quit. The hunt was on. You know this is outside authority, Morrison said at the parking lot, his voice careful. No official mission, no backup, just us and whatever favors we can call in. Reese opened the truck door. Good thing I'm used to operating outside authority. Morrison smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. Reaper, you'll be the death of me. Not if I help it. Didn't drag you off a mountain to lose you in Nevada. But before they could climb in, Reese paused. Looked back at the range where the young recruit was still shooting, still learning, still becoming something more than what she was. She reminds me of someone, Morrison said quietly. Yeah, someone who was told she didn't belong, that she wasn't strong enough, wasn't good enough. And what happened to that someone? Reese touched the photograph in her vest pocket. Her mother's face, worn from being carried through fire and memory. She thought about the mile shot, the impossible pistol shot that downed a missile, the choice to save Morrison instead of chasing glory. She learned the hardest shots aren't the ones you take, they're the ones you choose not to. Morrison nodded slowly. Your mother knew that too, in the end. Maybe that's why Crow's still running. He took every shot, never learned when to hold fire. Reese climbed into the truck. Through the windshield, she could see the recruit firing again, learning, growing, becoming. When we find him, Morrison got in beside her. We bring him in alive, let him face justice, let him answer for every life he destroyed. That's how we honor your mother. Not with revenge, with something better. And if he doesn't want to come quietly, restarted the engine. Then he'll learn what my mother's daughter can do when she's not following someone else's bad orders. They drove off base into the California morning. Two warriors heading toward an uncertain future, bound by fire and blood, and the code that said you never abandon a teammate. Somewhere across the desert, Vincent Crow was about to discover the past he'd buried was coming for him. Not with overwhelming force, not with official sanction, but with two operators who refused to quit, who knew the difference between justice and revenge, who understood that the hardest victories weren't won with bullets, but with principles that bullets couldn't touch. The scope was clear, the range was known, the wind was steady, and Reese Hartwell had already made two impossible shots. The third one could wait. She had all the time in the world.